Philippa Fabbri. Welcome to the Show Your Superpower series. Conversations with engineers, entrepreneurs, creatives, founders, scientists, thought leaders, disruptors, and warriors. Here to provide insight into what differently able children can become, given the right environment, teachers, and parenting. Because just asking the right questions and listening to what our children need can turn real challenges into superpowers that can change their world. Here we go. Good evening. Welcome to Q and A Superpower series with myself, Philippa Fabbri. It's lovely to be with you this evening. It's Wednesday and we are busy with the French Open, and it's all very exciting because the men are about to go on to court for the quarterfinal. Djokovic, I think, is playing an Italian stallion, so I'm looking forward to that after this. But yes, I just wanted to spend a few minutes just going through dyslexia, some Q and A questions that have come through from people that watched last week. Last week, if you did catch my chat with Preeyus Patel, a young man who is living with dyslexia and is a very successful engineer and is doing amazing things in terms of what our sustainability of our environment and bringing knowledge about engineering and building to the youth and to people. He's the youngest principal engineer, and it was awesome chatting to him and just hearing about his trials and tribulations as he was navigating school and how he dealt with his dyslexia. And I thought it would be an awesome opportunity to just summarize some of the points that came up from that talk. And let me know if you are watching, where you are from, and let's get into the conversation. Before I start though, the Minister Angie Motshekga has announced some changes in education and in our schools, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are about this issue. One of the changes is the introduction of some African languages. And here in the Eastern Cape, that would mean Sesotho comes in and isiXhosa comes in as African languages that children can take as first languages, as a mother tongue learner. They would then be able to get their lessons in their home language, and they would be able to get their exams and write their exams in their mother tongue. For additional language learners, it means that you could then make a choice between Afrikaans, or an additional language would be either Afrikaans as your mother tongue and then your second language being English, or isiXhosa or Sesotho. Or you can choose between English, your home language, and then choosing your second language to be either Afrikaans or Sesotho or isiXhosa. And that is going to be coming in. In fact, it has already come in, and some schools are already doing that. The other subjects that she's bringing in are entrepreneurship and coding and robotics. From 2022, all schools will be having those subjects being introduced. So I'm wondering how you feel about that. Specifically, if your child does have dyslexia, we know that children with dyslexia really struggle with language, and I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more. But in terms of bringing in a third language or bringing in another language, whether it's Afrikaans or whether it's an African language, how you think children who struggle with language will cope with that. So yeah, let's dive in and have a look. Please, if there are any questions or comments, you are more than welcome to put those into the comments, and we'll deal with them. But there are a few questions that I'm going to be delving into this evening. The first one is obviously one that everybody's been asking me, and that is, what is dyslexia? So the definition of dyslexia is that it is a neurological condition, and it is caused by a different kind of wiring of the brain. There's no cure for dyslexia. It's not a disease, but it's a condition that individuals need to live with and learn how to cope. They need to learn coping strategies, and it also has absolutely nothing to do with intelligence. people with dyslexia are no less or more intelligent than the rest of the population. But it is something that it's a different wiring of the brain. These children or these persons learn differently, and it's a condition that they navigate around. And as we saw, sometimes it can develop into a superpower, that they really do thrive and do amazing things with this condition. Some people say that having dyslexia is a gift. And yeah, that's another conversation. I tend to agree. The second question is what causes dyslexia? And the exact causes of dyslexia are not completely clear. Brain imagery studies show differences in the way that brain or the way the brain of a person with dyslexia develops and functions. So it's most common in that children struggle to read and write. They struggle to learn to spell, and they struggle to identify the different speech sounds within a word. They struggle with the coding of the letter and the sound that letter makes. And as I said before, it's not a disease, and there's no cure. The third question is what are the effects of dyslexia? So what are the effects of having dyslexia? What are the effects that it has on a child's academic development? So the core difficulty that dyslexia would have is that they would struggle with reading words and processing and manipulating sounds, and they struggle to manage the learning of the phonics. So you often find a child will learn their individual sounds and their vowels quite easily. So the beginning stages of learning to read and spell, they might be okay. But then as they get older, and the spelling and the reading words get a little bit more complex and difficult, that's where they really start to struggle. And their spelling becomes more phonetic. And often when you try and decipher a dyslexic spelling words, you can't even, it's like they've just thrown a whole lot of letters together, thrown them in a cup, shaken them up, and then thrown them onto the page. There's really no way of trying to decipher what that word is. So, really it's something that affects the child's grammar, learning the grammar rules and the different punctuation rules, the plurals, all those complex concepts that they start to learn as they go through the lower primary stages. As they get older, they struggle to understand their textbook material, and with comprehensions, they also will really battle to read and be able to answer comprehension questions. There's also a real challenge with regards to writing of essays. And these are the children who might have amazing stories in their heads, but to get those stories out on paper is another ball game altogether. They can tell you the most incredible stories, but when you ask them to write that down, if you're lucky, you'll get one or two jumbled up sentences, and it doesn't really make much sense. The fourth question is, how common is dyslexia? Now, again, this is a myth. What I've heard, and what people tend to say, is that dyslexia is more common in boys than it is in girls. And the answer is actually it's equally distributed. The same amount of boys than girls will have dyslexia. And as many as 1 in 5 persons will have some kind of language problem. It's a challenge with reading, with spelling, with writing, as common as 1 in 5. And it is the most common cause of reading, writing, and spelling problems. And as you know, it's also on a spectrum. You get very mild and you get quite severe dyslexia as well. Right, the next question is, what do I do if I suspect that my child has dyslexia? This is a question as well that parents don't really know what to do. Firstly, they don't know where to go to get the assessment, and they also don't know what to do when the child comes back and the report comes back saying your child is reading 2 years or 3 years below grade level and there's a diagnosis of dyslexia. So some red flags to look out for, parents, if you are watching and you're listening to this. Look out, especially in your young child, look out for problems in rhyming, that they don't remember the rhymes. They struggle with rhyming words. They struggle to blend sounds together. They do battle with learning the alphabet, knowing the sequence of the days of the week or the months of the year, linking letters with sounds. So again, it's that whole decoding of knowing what a letter sounds like, and difficulty learning rules of spelling and the grammar rules. They really struggle with that. It's foreign to them. So they'll write a word L-I-K, and they say that word says like. They haven't remembered the E at the end. They also mispronounce words. So a word like elephant, they might say something like elephant, and they won't be able to say the whole word. And also difficulty remembering sight words. Those are the little sight words that you can't really sound out. You've just got to know what they are, like the, because you can't phonetically decipher that word. You've just got to know that it's THE says the. And then listening comprehension. Sometimes their listening comprehension is far better than their reading comprehension. They can listen to a story and be able to answer every single question, but they struggle to read that same comprehension and answer the same questions. So the red flags in the upper primary school now, as the children are getting older, these are your reluctant readers. They're not that keen to pick up a book and read for fun. They might be slow word by word readers. They have great difficulty in learning word lists. They can probably read a word in context, so they can read it in a sentence, but let them have a list of words 1 to 20 and they will struggle, but put that word in a sentence and they'd be able to read it because it makes sense. They are very poor spellers. They struggle to read nonsense words because, again, they don't have that phonetic code of being able to decipher a word by how the letters sound. They are non-fluent writers. They are reluctant writers. Like I said before, they won't enjoy writing long paragraphs and long sentences. It'll be short and sweet and to the point and as little as possible. And when they're speaking, they might have a tendency to mispronounce words. Things like floor mat, they would say format. Difficulty using and comprehending, as I said, the grammar rules, grammar structures, and then, as I said, listening comprehension is far better than their reading comprehension. Also notice their vocabulary. Sometimes a child with dyslexia will have a very poor vocabulary. They'll use simple words rather than longer, more complex words. But on the other side, there are also kids who are extremely fluent and very good with their verbal expression, but they would struggle so how they speak is very different to how they write. They'll speak very well, but their writing and their spelling will be like 2 or 3 years below how they are actually expressing themselves. And the next question, and we are nearly at the end, is where do I take my child to be assessed? Now again, folks, if you are not needing to have an IQ assessment done, if you are just wanting to assess your child's language ability, their reading, their spelling, their comprehension, you don't need to get an IQ assessment done. Then you can go to a remedial therapist or a language specialist, and they will do a battery of tests. And some of those tests will be that they want to check your child's oral language, their word recognition, how they decode words, their fluency, their comprehension, their phonological processing. Again, how do they process sounds? Can they manipulate sounds in a word? And their vocabulary knowledge. What is their verbal expression like? How well do they speak and use vocabulary? If, on the other hand, you are wanting an IQ assessment done, but remember what I said before, IQ is not an indicator of dyslexia. You get some people with an incredibly high IQ who are very severely dyslexic, and so it has nothing to do with IQ. But if you do want an IQ assessment, then you would go to a clinical psychologist or a counseling psychologist who is able to do reading assessments as well. So they would then do a cognitive assessment with a scholastic assessment together. But if you are using that assessment or that report to apply for a concession for your child so that they get accommodations, that IQ assessment needs to be done almost every year or every 2 years. So I wouldn't suggest you have an IQ assessment done unless you are needing to apply for a concession. Otherwise, you can just have a language assessment done with a remedial therapist. So now, if your child does come back with a diagnosis of dyslexia, what do you do? So what now? So folks, there again, you have got your child's report in your hands, and now that piece of paper is an incredibly valuable piece of paper. You don't want to be losing that report. You are wanting to take that report and have a meeting at the school, and you are wanting the teachers to understand exactly how your child learns. With a proper diagnosis, your child has a right to various accommodations. Accommodations like they should be able to have a reader, and if they also have a writing dyslexia, they can have a scribe for their exam. So they can do an oral exam where they speak their exam and somebody is writing their answers down. The reader will read the questions for them, so they don't need to read the question. They just need to be able to understand what the question is, and then they can say the answer and somebody can write it down. That is a reader scribe. So if your child has a reader scribe, it means they are giving an oral exam. They are doing an oral exam. If there's no problem with the writing, but they still need a reader, that is a separate concession altogether. But again, it all depends on what the recommendation in the report is. So like I said, you need to take that report, you need to go to the school, and you need to have a meeting with the teachers and make sure that your child gets accommodations in the classroom. So with hard work, with lots of support, looking like you needing to help your child study for exams so that they need to be helped. If there's a textbook and lots of reading that they have to do, you might need to be their scribe and their reader, so that they listen to you reading the work. They then can go in and write the exam the next morning. I'm just going to pause there. There's a question: where do parents go for an assessment if they can't afford it? Bronwyn, that is a major issue. We don't have too many options here in Port Elizabeth. They can go to the university, the clinic there, and there's a long waiting list. They can put their names down and they can get assessed there. I think they could also apply at the education department, the support center in Park Drive. You again would have to put your name down and you'd have to wait for your turn in the queue. But we do have a problem in terms of public support for assessments. You know, you could always ask a psychologist if they would do a pro bono work. Some psychologists are very happy to do that, or if they are willing to do it at a reduced cost if you ask. In terms of support, again, I want to close off with a case study. This necklace I'm going to tell you about at the end, but I'm wearing this necklace and it's a very special piece of jewelry. I'll tell you about it in a minute. So I had a student, I'm going to call his name PC. PC was a student that I got to know when he was in grade 4, as way back as 2010. He had already repeated grade 1, he had moved schools, and he also repeated grade 2. So he was already 2 years older than the rest of the class. You can imagine what that was like for him. He came with, I think he had been diagnosed with ADHD and he had been on medication for a while, but it really wasn't agreeing with him at all. And his mom had asked that we just accommodate his dyslexia and not worry too much about the ADHD, because the main focus was to try and get him to be able to learn to read and write and spell. So when he came, it was recommended that he start occupational therapy and remedial therapy, which he was having once a week. His reading was as much as 2 years below grade level. And this is even with him repeating grade 1 and grade 2. So almost 4 years below he was reading and spelling. Fluency, comprehension, spelling was weak. Almost on a grade 1 level was his spelling. and he really struggled to spell words when he had to learn his lists, and his mom used to try and get him to remember the spelling. He would remember it for the test at home, go to school the next day, write the test. He knew it the day before, could not remember how to spell those words, and he used to come back with 6 out of 20, 3 out of 20. It was quite disheartening, really. Poor knowledge of phonics. He hadn't learned his phonics, so he didn't really know words and blends, letters and blends, like the CH sound ch, the EA sound E, the OU sound O. He had no idea of those blends. And auditory memory was very weak. He often would say, "Can you please repeat the question? Please, can you say that again? I didn't hear what you said." Dictation, he struggled with dictation. You couldn't give him a dictation to write down. You'd have to literally, word for word, he'd have to write down the dictation. So his goals when he arrived was to try and get his reading level and spelling level up, at least 1 level or 2 levels up, to give him accommodations. So he had a special dictionary that he could use. He could write down his own words that he struggled to spell. He wasn't given a normal Oxford dictionary. He had his own dictionary where all his commonly used words were written down, and he could refer to those words. The Oxford dictionary was just too much, too many words, too overwhelming. And he had a writing prompt, which he had in his book, and the writing prompt just gave him a structure for his stories. So how to start a story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. Because when you used to ask him to write a story, no matter what the topic was, he didn't know how to get going. He did not know how to process and plan his work so that he was able to write the necessary amount of words. He would literally shut down. He just was not interested in writing stories. So where an essay was a 50-mark essay, he would only get about 10 marks. So when we provided him with a scribe, you can imagine how that improved his marks. So every test and every exam, he was then able to orally give his answers, and he could then plan his work with somebody that was helping him. Also with the dyslexia, he had extra time. So every hour of the exam, he was given an extra 15 minutes. When he got to grade 10 and 11, he then tried to wean himself off the scribe, and he decided that he wanted to try and do these exams on his own. We had given him enough support in the years leading up to grade 10, where he felt, and we also felt, that he needed to be given a chance on his own. So for grades 10 and 11, and even for matric, he managed to do those exams on his own. The only concession that he had was extra time, so that he was able to have enough time to finish his paper. It definitely took away the anxiety, and he wasn't rushing as much to get through his paper. He had a very supportive family. He had a very supportive mom. She would work hard with him in the afternoons when he had to study and when he had projects to do. She was amazing. He had teachers that he absolutely loved. He became one of our mentors at school. In fact, he was so sweet with the little kids. He was just such a, he was quite a popular boy, because he was, on the soccer team, and he was a prefect, and eventually he became head boy. And I think that all those things just boosted his confidence and made him the most gentleman, sort of gentle giant, so to speak. Everybody loved him. He was just the most amazing ambassador for his school. And I think now, if I'm not mistaken, he's at NMU. But this necklace, when I taught him, when he was still in intermediate phase, grade 4, 5, and 6, 1 year, he gave me this necklace for a Christmas present at the end of the year, for a thank you present. And it's something that I've always kept, and I'll never forget this boy. Really, he was one of our success stories. He came such a long way, and we were very proud of him when he was able to matriculate. But I just sort of wanted to put that into perspective, that, we always say that you're not your label. A child is never their label. The label is only there to help with the accommodations that the child needs, to help with the medication that they need, to help with the support. But it doesn't define the child. It doesn't define who they are. So at the end of the day, when you know that your child is struggling with something, the key is to get support as quickly as possible, get the right support, go to the right people to get advice, and then when you get that diagnosis or you get that definition of what the problem is to then give the right accommodation so that that child can thrive. So the whole point of the Superpower series, Show Your Superpower series, is to identify these specific differences that children might have and how to turn those into strengths, how to return your memory, your amazing memory that you might have, because you have dyslexia, so you have this incredible memory and you learn by memory. Or you might have this amazing ability to debate and to stand up and present in front of a group of people. You have this amazing way of speaking. That is your superpower. That is your strength. So on Wednesday, when I'm back on Wednesday, I'm going to be chatting to a chap by the name of Darren Clark. He is a dyslexia influencer. He's an award-winning entrepreneur. He hosts neurodiversity stories. And his why is he is changing perceptions for neurodiversity globally through speaking, training, and consulting. His name is Darren Clark. He'll be my guest on Wednesday at 8 o'clock. So I hope you'll join me for that. And please feel free, if you need to email me, my email address, please feel free to email me any other questions that you might have with regards to dyslexia, neurodiversities, superpowers. Other than that, thank you so much for joining me. Have a lovely evening, and we will see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m.